A lot of people think finding God means doing something more, going somewhere else, or becoming a different version of yourself. Today, we're going to be talking about how God shows up in ordinary life. He shows up in the morning, he shows up in the evening, he shows up in the routine. This is the All In Podcast. I hope you are in your routine right now, finding God in your ordinary life, on your drive while you're listening. Thanks for tuning in. All right, boys to men, gentlemen, silent
quiet night.
What are we talking about today? We're talking about finding God in ordinary life, which is maybe more difficult than it seems. So what is it? We use the phrase, God just seems distant right now. What do we mean when we say that? God feels distant.
That's a great question. I think when I first started forming a relationship with God, when I said that, it meant I was in a state of mortal sin. And I just didn't know it. I thought I was going through the dark night of the soul.
I don't know what's going on right now.
Just can't figure it out. Like, he's so far away.
He's so far. It was me, though.
It was for sure.
User error.
I can relate to that.
Yeah. Sorry, you were going to say something before I derailed.
That was actually brilliant. Yeah. I was going to make a similar comment that normally that just means I haven't spent any time with him or prioritized him in any way.
Yeah.
And I'm blaming it on him that he's distant.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that that's what's similar. Is like, okay, maybe now I know that if I'm in a state of mortal sin, that doesn't mean that God is distant. That means I am. But now, whenever I have that thought or I say that, I'm usually blaming things on God that are just like, I'm just not prioritizing my relationship with him,
Yeah.
It could also be a way that people are just trying to articulate that they're at a different stage of their journey with God than maybe they were in the past. So, a book that all three of us have probably read, Interior Freedom, is by a French gentleman named Jacques Philippe. He goes through the kind of stages of a spiritual journey with God, and talks about how at the beginning, and a lot of us can probably relate to this. Like when we first started following God, you showed up to prayer and you were in the fifth dimension. Like you just
felt that way.
You
which is why I can read these types of nonfiction books.
Because you've been there yourself.
Yeah.
But you just show up to prayer and it was amazing.
Yeah.
It was like a 9-month long honeymoon with God where you're just like, this is outstanding. I will never not pray ever again.
Right.
But then he talks about how after a certain time period, your old habits that originally were kind of washed clean by the crazy explosion of grace have now kind of come back a little bit, and that distance starts to grow. So you felt really close to God, but then after 6 months, 9 months, maybe a year, the warm and fuzzies have started to leave, and you're left with the day-to-day marriage of a relationship with God. Mm-hmm. One that's not full of sparks, but one that's full of kind of a routine of life. And I know in those moments of my spiritual life, those are moments where I'm tempted to feel like, hey, why are you not as close as you once were?
It's kind of like when you're texting and flirting with a girl, you think everything's going great, but then she ghosts you, and you're still texting her, and you're like, why are things not the same anymore?
You up?
Why?
You still up?
That's a really long shower you've taken.
Okay.
It's been 3 weeks.
Okay, well then, so how do we, God isn't a tease, it's not like, hey, I'm going to, right at the beginning, you're showing some interest in me here, so I'm going to pour out this grace, but then I'm going to pull back, and you're kind of like, well, what's going on here? So how do you rectify that, I guess, a little bit, he's not trying to tease you, right? He's not trying to play games with you.
Yeah.
What does that mean? What's going on there?
I think part of that is just normal maturing, right? It's kind of like you use the analogy of marriage, of just because things aren't as easy and not in this honeymoon stage doesn't mean that my marriage is a tease either, or my wife is a tease. I think, yeah, it's just a normal maturing of a relationship. But I think it's also just, and John Michael, jump in at any point here because I'm kind of just processing his question. It also reminds me of like the retreat high, right? When you
Right.
first go through something so crazy, like a conversion to God, there's this high, and then you're just kind of going back to normal. But when you experience something so good and taste something so beautiful, when you go back to like normal, you kind of feel like all of a sudden there's an absence of it, but there's not. It's just different than when it was like for the first like month, or according to John Michael, 9 months for him. But yeah, I don't know. I'm like slowly processing this. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think because busyness oftentimes can distract and take away from our awareness of God's movements, that oftentimes when our attention is constantly on other things, he's actually still working. He actually may be much closer than we recognize, but because we don't have our pulse on his movements in our life, that we feel as if he's distant, when in reality he's right there, but we just never noticed it. And so I think moving a little bit quickly to solutions here, or maybe an aspect where you can step back in, is a practice of some sort of yearly retreat would be a practice that awakens you and kind of gets your senses back in gear to just getting a sense of where God's moving in your life. So we talked a lot about a couple episodes ago, the value of a vacation in the role of the family, allowing for a recentering of priorities. The spiritual retreat and taking a 2 or 3 day retreat every year can get us back to where we're more calibrated to the movements of God, and a discovery phase of, man, he's actually probably been here closer to me than I even felt.
Mm-hmm.
I like what you said about the senses, right? And I don't know why the image came to me. Maybe it's because I just went to the eye doctor last week and they were wondering how I'm still using the glasses I have on. And I don't know if you can tell through the camera, there's super glue in 5 different parts of these glasses. But of like, yeah, whenever I first came to this like conversion with God, whenever I first come to a retreat, it's like I just got new glasses.
Mm-hmm.
And as the year goes on, right, my frames start getting a little bent. I have a big head, right? So my frames usually start going like this, and maybe one of the arms will snap off. The lenses will start getting a little scratched, and it becomes a little harder to see just with the wear and tear of time, right? Which in the spiritual life can be just like the distraction that you're talking about, the dulling of the senses. And like, yeah, a yearly retreat is a great way. It's like going back to the doctor to get new glasses.
Mm-hmm.
To get new
I really like that's a great analogy.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
But you know what's also kind of really frustrating at the same time with this?
Huh.
How much
Is
it cost?
No,
Oh.
well, with insurance, it's actually, I think I paid $5.
Wow.
But
It's pretty good.
which was great. It's the only part of insurance I understand. Is that every single year, like your eye prescription expires after a year.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Don't
which
get me
I think
started on
that's-
this. Yeah.
Okay, this makes a lot of sense because
Big
2 of my
glasses
kids
is-
have
yeah.
big glasses.
Big glasses out there trying to, because it's like
Well, and they have to get
my
new glasses
prescription
every year.
has not changed since I first got glasses 12
Really?
years ago. It actually got a
Mine
little better.
changes every year.
Really? Mine got
Yeah.
a little better. I went from -1 and 0.75 to -0.75 and -0.5.
See, I'm -4.5 on both eyes now.
Really?
Yeah.
You use contacts?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I have the best vision at the table.
Really?
2020.
You know,
Wow.
I mean, if our listeners that might have a prescription or bad eyesight might be hearing me talking about my prescription, like, you don't need glasses. I remember it was...
Is that a
when I
low
was-
prescription?
It's a very low prescription.
Okay.
When I first got to college, it would happen a little bit in high school, just being one of the taller people. I would always sit in the back, and I would always have kind of like a little bit of a harder time reading the board. When I got to college, to these mega classrooms at Texas A&M, I was like kind of struggling, and one of my friends was like, "Here, try on my glasses," and he's like, "I barely have anything," and I tried them on. I was like, "Oh my gosh,
It's an insane experience.
this is what seeing the world is like."
Yeah.
Like, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I can actually see the leaves of the tree over
There's
there," you know?
another spiritual analogy right there.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
You know,
Go ahead, make it.
getting the, the renewal of vision,
Mm.
you know.
Well, I mean, the it's analogies, but there's actually something there. I mean, in the Catholic faith that we live in, the sacraments all have relation to the senses. So like when you get your child baptized, there's the oil that they put on that has that, powerful smell. It stays on the baby for like weeks at a time. And that's supposed to engage the senses to awaken to the things of God. There's incense, which, we smell during certain masses. There's the water, which you can feel. And then there's even the visual of, right, the priest usually takes their thumb on the infant and says, "Ephata," which is Hebrew for "be opened" over their eyes. So, I mean, we are in good company with our senses analogies here.
Mm.
What is the spiritual equivalent of when you're eating popcorn and you get like a kernel stuck like in the back of your teeth? And you can't get it out and you can't really reach with your tongue or with your finger.
That is the worst.
It's the worst.
That is
thing.
like
I
top
hate
5
it.
most
Yeah.
painful experiences.
I don't know about painful.
Well,
but maybe
it
just
can be painful. If it gets
Frustrating.
stuck in your gum, then it can be painful.
Oh yes.
When,
It
you,
is.
You're
when
right.
you get that thing out, you are like, all
I'm
right,
king of the world.
to the bars.
Bars.
We're celebrating.
Sorry, babe. I need you to stay with
You're
our
not
4 kids.
I got a popcorn kernel out.
Another great feeling is if you might be able to tell right now, I have a stuffy nose. And it's
We'll
like,
edit that out.
you can it's like after you're sick with a stuffy nose, the first time you can use both nostrils, you're like, oh my gosh, this is what I've never been able to breathe before until this point. And it's like, this is the most amazing thing in the whole world,
That's how I felt when I got to John Michael's house the other day, and I put on my first nasal strip ever.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I didn't feel my nose collapsing. You know how like when you breathe in hard, it was like just a runway of fresh air going straight to my brain.
So we host a lot of people in our guest room, and I've, some people put out little snacks, little bottles of lotion, toothpaste,
That's
little,
nice.
little
Whenever
brush.
you hosted me, you put a sheet on the floor.
It was a mattress with a sheet on
the
top of
floor.
it.
That's because the mattress collapsed in the middle of the night.
But I've started to lay out nose strips for my guests.
Oh, that's nice.
People love them.
Yeah.
And I have an affiliate link that after they buy it.
I'm gonna start staying at your place every time.
That was great. I'll tell you another phenomenal experience is, and my wife, we don't see eye to eye on this. Hawking, like when you have mucus in the back of your throat after a cold, and when you cough it up and spit it out, and you see how big it is in the sink, and you're just like, heck yeah, that one was
Where does
huge.
your wife differ on that?
She hates it when I
When
do
you
it.
do it?
Oh yeah, she's like, because I do it in the kitchen sink, and she's like, that's disgusting. And I'm like, what, you think we're eating out of the kitchen sink? What's the big deal?
Do you not eat it?
Yeah. I think, how's that disgusting? It's the same as any other sink,
That's funny. My
It's a
my
great
wife gets
feeling.
mad at me when I accidentally pour chicken juice on top of like the cleaning materials.
You pour chicken juice?
Yeah,
What did you say?
Chicken juice?
What does that mean?
Where are you getting chicken
Well, you
juice?
know how,
What do
like,
you mean,
chicken
chicken
juice?
broth?
No. Like when you take the chicken out of the thing and there's kind of like still some juiciness in there.
What thing?
What thing?
Out of the container, the
Like raw
chicken
chicken.
container, raw chicken.
Oh,
Like you buy
okay.
chicken
You buy raw
breast.
chicken, and before I throw the
I can't believe you said, I can't believe she gets mad at me for pouring raw chicken juice on the cleaning supplies.
well, anyways, that's something I get in trouble for.
What do you mean?
That's how
Like,
COVID started.
Like you pour it on top of like the soap container.
Well, we've got the brush and it stays in the sink.
Well,
like
that's true. I mean, that's something you could fix right
where
there.
you put it on the side of the sink.
Yeah, anywhere besides where you're pouring your dirty,
Chicken
I will
juices.
say it's happened before where there's like dishes or knives piled up on top of the cleaning brush, and then I
Yeah.
reach in there and I slice my
Cut
hand
your
on
hand,
a kitchen
yeah.
knife.
Really?
Anyway, what are we
That's
talking
tough.
about?
Chicken juice.
The spiritual equivalent of getting popcorn.
The spiritual equivalent of chicken juice.
Mm.
Venial sin, maybe.
Venial sin.
So
That's probably it.
Yeah. So
Anyways.
how do you find God in order? we were talking about glasses, prescriptions,
Mhm.
and the senses.
Well, here's something that I think begins to happen is just that we go through our day to day, and we're maybe not having the same experience of God as we did before. Or maybe our senses, our spiritual attunement to God is not the same as it was, I don't know, yesterday, last month, before I had the baby. Now it's after I had the baby, and things are a little bit different right now. And we tend to start to try and just, try to just grasp for things and begin to look for God outside of the ordinary. Why do we begin to do that? To start trying to go to extreme lengths to look for God rather than encounter him in the midst of our poverty, our weakness, our mundaneness.
I think because that feels boring, frankly.
Yeah.
It feels unexciting. It feels as if I am living a loveless marriage with a God who has created me and formed me and brought me into his family. And the beauty of this podcast is, we've been hitting a lot of these topics of just the day-to-day life. And I think hopefully that's some of the value we're bringing to our listeners is, we're not experts. We're not theologians. We're not academics. Frankly, the only thing we're good at is sharing our real life experiences of what this stuff looks like in our day-to-day life. And then weaving that in with tangents and humor that make it humorous as we look at how crazy and relentless and overwhelming our lives are. And so circling back to your point, Clayton, I think, as much as we don't want it to be the case, the absolute reality of faith is that it is essentially boring. It is boring. It is day after day after day after day choosing the right next step. I think about, I got to visit recently with a good friend of mine who's become a religious sister. And, for those who may not be aware, basically women and men who, have a deep love of Christ, they oftentimes will say, hey, I'm going to forego marriage to become a religious sister. And so I'm kind of marrying Jesus in a way. And a lot of them will live in convents where they very infrequently.
Yeah.
What did you say?
Infrequently get to leave the convent. And so I was just asking her about that. Like, hey, what's that experience like of doing the exact same thing every single day for years and years and years on end? And her response was, it's so beautiful. Because God isn't found in the big moments. He's found them in my faithfulness to the monotony of the tasks that my superior has asked me to complete. Mm. And so faith is boring in so much as it requires the fidelity of the individual to the mundane tasks that our Lord has asked us to complete each day.
Cut.
Cut.
That's it. Another trademark to John Michael monologue. That was
easy.
That was absolutely wonderful.
Easy.
Yeah.
I do that in my sleep.
Well, I think something that honestly all of us can relate to. Some of our listeners are probably married. Many of them are probably not at the same time, but that's just such a relatable thing in marriage as well, is just that.
Did you notice what he said?
What?
He goes, many of our listeners are married. Many are also not married at the same time.
We're all married to the game, though.
Right.
I can't believe this is my life. All right. Is that, very similar to the way that God draws us to himself. You remember after your first date with your now wife, and you're just just on top of the world.
Yeah.
I floated home. Feet didn't even touch the ground.
After your first date?
My Pontiac Grand Am turned into a Grand Wagoneer all of a sudden.
Clayton's first date with Reagan,
he told us at my rehearsal dinner.
So it was in San Antonio where his wife is from and where I'm from as well. And so he was staying at my place, and he gets home from the date. He opens the door, and I'm waiting for him downstairs. I'm like, hey man, how'd it go? Doesn't make eye contact, just walks in, leans against the wall, and then just goes, and kind of deflates and falls to the ground. His back against the wall just slides down.
I'm in love, and I don't care who knows it.
Yeah.
Reagan, I love you more now than I did then.
Oh, jeez. Shut up.
I may not feel it all the time, but
might not show it either.
No, but I mean, you go through, and then the same thing happens when you get married.
Yeah.
You go through the honeymoon phase, and then normal life starts hitting in the mundane. What are you laughing at now?
It's just, yeah.
I'm laughing because your honeymoon, you got really sick.
I did. I had
Yeah,
the flu.
mundane hit quick.
It did.
And you would FaceTime me every day on your honeymoon.
Did I?
You were
Alone in my bed?
You were in your hotel room, and you would flip the camera to the window and to like the beach and be like, "There's Reagan. I'm in here with a fever."
They told me I had Zika virus, so that was really scary.
That is scary.
So
Did you have it?
I did not end up having Zika virus,
Proud of you.
thankfully.
Who's Zika?
Hardly Noah. All right, what are we talking about? Okay, so
How your marriage is very mundane.
I'm just saying, that we tell me you all can relate to this.
Nope.
Every day of my marriage is better than the day before.
It's just that, you start going through, everyday life. And I would say, there's some days where my wife and I are really able to connect with each other at the beginning of the day or the end of the day. And sometimes where we try to connect with each other and we just don't.
You just miss.
Yeah, you just miss. And, sometimes you go on a date and it's pretty normal. You just, you talk, you share some things. And then other times you go on a date and you're like, man, I really love you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And it's just, those moments are, I'm not saying that, you need, what we're trying to say here is you don't need the big retreat in order to feel those same feelings. You don't need the big, decision or the monumental thing in order to chase those feelings back. But I would say definitely within marriage, there's a fidelity and commitment that you have on a day-to-day basis, which some days you feel, and some days you don't feel, and, there's graces within marriage in the same way that there's graces within prayer where, there's a grace of, oh my gosh, we just went on a really great date, and now we feel more connected. And I feel like I'm so much more present to you than I was yesterday or the last week. And sometimes, a great date and it was just really normal. And you're looking for those, feelings again. And sometimes they come and sometimes they don't. And so here's a question, how do we get out of the mode of, relying on our feelings in order to fuel our decision making?
Say it one more time. How do we get?
I would say when you're younger, I guess another analogy I can use is that both of you know that I'm a big phase guy.
I
That's
could
an understatement.
you have never said something more true.
And there's a rush of excitement, in order to begin something, and then it lasts 2 weeks and it kind of dies down, and I come up with another idea, and then I chase that thing for a couple weeks, and then it kind of dies down, and it's this rush of excitement. It's fueling this energy that's making me do all of these things. Then when that goes away, I'm like, moving on to the next thing. So what does that look? What does it take to kind of have that shift in your life where I'm going to choose to be faithful, and faithful to my everyday duties to my spouse and to God, regardless of the way that I feel about it in that moment. How does that shift begin to happen within you?
I find that if you look at your spiritual life and you look at your experience of our Lord like fence posts, hear me out, Jose. All right.
I'm listening.
Here we go. So if you can imagine a fence, you have, let's say a barbed wire fence. You got your post, and then you have the barbed wire to the next fence, the barbed wire to the next fence, and the post is what is holding the barbed wire up. What is the analogy there is that you should have fence posts in your day that bring you back and hold you up close to our Lord without having to really think about it or choose it for yourself. So a good fence post could be in the morning upon waking, I have a fence post of the morning offering, which is basically just a prayer offering my day to God. Then my next fence post is when I get in my car, which I do every morning to drive to work. That next fence post is maybe I listen to the rosary meditation on Hallow. Mm-hmm. And then the next fence post is at noon I pray the Angelus, and the Angelus is basically just a prayer to Our Lady to recenter. And then at 3:00, my next fence post is I pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet, and then right before bed, I do an examination. And so you're not relying on emotion. You're relying on the consistency and the habits of things you are already doing in your life. Getting in the car, looking at the clock, going to sleep, waking up in the morning. And these are those kind of fence post moments throughout the day so that you can set boundaries around yourself to create spaces for these moments. Because when we rely on emotion, emotion is fleeting. And habits and decisions are what last. And so if you're relying on emotion, that's going to run out at a certain point, and desire will run out. But when you have these markers that remind us to enter into a behavior, that's actually where you see success come.
Yeah. I kind of approach it a little differently, and it ends up being the same thing. But I don't know if we talked about it on the show. I think we did a couple of months ago at this point, where I think growing up, like I always had a hard time with emotions. I don't feel a lot of emotions strongly, which is why I wanted to be a CIA secret agent for a long time. Did we talk about that on the show?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I wanted to be a special agent for the CIA because I was like, oh, well, if I don't feel a lot of emotion, I'd be great at international espionage. With that, emotions...
When did that dream end?
I don't think it did.
Like, at what point were you just like, hey, your phone has been turned off recently, frequently?
Yeah, I mean, hey, I can either confirm or deny if that dream has ended.
Catholic missionary would be a heck of a cover.
Yeah, it would.
It'd be a phenomenal podcaster.
And so with that, for me, a lot of these things haven't been, which again, this is what I'm saying, like it ends up being the same thing, but the nuance of like, it's not emotion driven, but I am very lazy. I'm a very lazy individual. And so for me, it's just like in the moment, I will never pick the harder thing because I'm lazy. And so kind of, you're saying these fence posts that keep you kind of centered. I think for me, it's just like discipline. I just have to, like, I have to rely on discipline in order to get there, in order to get anywhere, because I am lazy. Right. And I like what you said. I like your whole analogy with the fence post. Don't love that you use barbed wire as a type of fence. But yeah, of like, I have to rely on discipline for my fidelity to God, right? To continue to show up, because I know myself and I know that I am lazy, and I know that I will always choose the easier or the path of least resistance. And there's a lot less resistance in not thinking about God than there is in thinking about God.
Follow-up question.
Okay.
Love the fence post analogy. And you have fence posts for, you know, your prayer life in the same way that I'm sure that in the same way you have fence posts in your family life as well. Regular routines and things to connect with your spouse and children. How do you avoid those fence posts from turning into just tasks that you have to accomplish? You know, you go to the Angelus, you go to the Divine Mercy Chaplet, but it just, hey, this is just another, you know, thing that I'm checking off my list because I'm supposed to do it.
It's funny because
I feel like it's impossible to never fall into that.
No,
you will fall into that at some point.
Yeah, you're destined to get that mindset. I took this to a new level though in terms of check boxes. So we all are we're big Whoop fans, and one of the values
not sponsored yet,
but it's a high performance wearable, as we've determined. And
for high performance people,
as you can tell by looking at us.
And please sponsor us. But there's a daily journal that you log your behaviors into. And typically people do behaviors like, did I eat well today? How many alcoholic beverages did I have? Did I use nicotine? You know, but then there's some kind of crazy ones, you know, it's like you can actually log, like, did you have sexual intimacy today? Don't know why big data would need to know that. Not going to put that in my big data. But there's one where you can do, did you pray today? And so I started logging my prayer on my Whoop.
It's literally a checkbox.
Yeah, it is actually a checkbox. And then it shows you how many times you did the behavior or didn't do the behavior. And then I started doing some A/B testing to see when I prayed.
You're like, okay, I'm not gonna pray
Okay.
today.
God, today I'm not going to pray, but
It's a
for
placebo.
research.
Purely for data.
It's a placebo.
My placebo prayer time.
But I was after 2 months, I was like, what am I doing? This is ridiculous. I'm literally seeing if my prayer affects my stress levels, my cortisol levels,
Yeah.
and my HRV. This is totally ludicrous. And so I think the damage of tracking these things and turning these things into habits to accomplish is that they can just be one of the many ways that you are trying to gamify yourself into being the best version.
I'll say the danger, not the damage.
Yeah, danger. Yeah.
But to your original question, like, yeah, I think it's impossible to never fall into that of like, it's just a checkbox. I think the important piece is being able to catch yourself and get out of it and get your new pair of glasses, right? So that you can start being more intentional with the Lord.
And I think some people fall into that thought process, and I have too, of like, I don't want this to just be something I'm checking the box of. So I'm just not even going to schedule it in.
I think that's the danger of
So
the opposite, yeah.
So that when my heart leaps at God, then I'll just jump into prayer.
You know, Mother Teresa said that she would encounter the Lord throughout her day, and so I no longer go pray so I can encounter God throughout my day.
I just see him in the car. I see him in the shelf.
My favorite was working with college students that are like building up the basic like habits of a Christian. It's like, oh, how's your prayer life? They're like, oh, it's great. I'm like, what do you do? They're like, oh, well, I pray before meals. Sometimes I'll pray in the shower. And before bed. And I'm like, okay, so you don't pray.
Yeah. You haven't prayed in
Well, you
years.
said no, you don't do any of those things, and he was like, no, I don't do any of those.
He's like,
things.
yeah, I know.
That's just what you say.
Yeah.
You know.
Pray before meals. Thank you for this food.
Amen.
Amen.
Well, here at the All In Podcast, we want our listeners to know that God is with you in the ordinary, and All In wants to be with you in the ordinary as well. Whether you're in the car, you're in the shower, you're eating breakfast, you're on your commute, make sure to share with a friend that has a 30-minute commute that needs a laugh. Make sure to like and subscribe as one of those fence posts in your life so that All In the same way as God, can always be with you. This is the All In Podcast. Thanks for listening.